You are listening to Processing Trauma Out Loud, conversations about trauma and healing from two women who are doing the work.
Hey everyone, this is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. Sher, we have had a lot going on, and I don't think we've met for almost a month, and it just feels so good to be back in this space recording an episode with you.
I agree. Yes, we've had time together, but not just you and me sitting here doing an episode.
Processing our trauma out loud.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and I want to say, and our healing, right? It's been not just the processing the trauma, but also the healing. And speaking of healing, you and I just got back from a 3-day retreat in Nebraska with 10 women.
Yep.
And today we want to talk about it. We want to talk about some questions that we were asked. And before we press record, I was naming that starting this healing journey, oftentimes we show up initially really trusting hardly anyone and even ourselves. Working with someone one-on-one is how most people start this journey. But wow, have we seen just the goodness of group healing? And that's what we wanted to talk about today, is what does it look like to heal in the context of a group?
Which is so different. The dynamics that come forward when we are sitting around in a circle with a group of women, particularly, who are all doing this work and who are at various places along the path and each dealing with our own stuff, but just being able to look into each other's faces and offer kindness and offer good, healthy, pure touch and ask curious questions. And especially in that place where we're together 24 hours a day for a few days, where things can come up and then we can revisit quickly and then we can go deeper. And it was beautiful. What we experienced this weekend was something that I think is one of the closest things to heaven.
Yes.
than I think I've experienced.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. It was very sweet in that, we played together, we ate together, and then we did take a deep dive into our group times. 10 women are a lot of women to sit around in a circle, and we didn't put a time limit on our sharing time. I felt personally that was a little bit of a risk.
Yep.
And you know me, I like everybody to get the same amount of time. But I quickly thought, no, this is going to be really beautiful that we just slow down. And we had one day. I know might be hard for some people to wrap their minds around, but we had one day that we spent 14 hours in group. Now we had breaks and we ate, but it was a 14-hour group day.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't change a thing.
I wouldn't either. It was amazing. And I want to also just say, I think this is important for our listeners to hear too, is that you and I were not leading this retreat. We were very much active participants. And many of the women in the group are doing some aspect of coaching also, not all of them, but some of them. And yet we all put ourselves in this place of coming together as peers doing the work. And it was intense and it was beautiful. And the combination of laughter and tears, knowing that people are cheering you on and going to the deep places with you, pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that we're coming today with sharing this is it's not uncommon that women eventually isolate or keep their close relationships at bay because of past hurt and maybe feeling too much or feeling like they don't measure up. All of those things can be true through experience, right? And so the spaces that we've been in and been a part of helping create is to give one another a new experience of that.
Yeah.
I mean, literally creating the new neuro pathways that we were actually created for community. We were created to be able to have intimate conversations where we feel safe, secure, soothed, and seen. I think I did those backwards, but they're still the 4 points. The four.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think let's just, if it's okay, we're going to take a few minutes and kind of even answer one of the questions that we were asked. So we had, I think, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we had different times where we were answering questions. And one of the questions that we answered was, if you could go back in time and give your little girl any gift, what would you give her? I just thought that was such a fun question. And I don't know about you, but I really didn't come up with anything really quick. I really tried to see her and move towards her to see what would have delighted her. And so, do you want to go first with what you would give her and then kind of expound on it, Cher? Why did you answer the question in the way you did? And what was your answer?
Yeah, it was surprising to me what my answer was, and it followed up on a comment that had been made by the woman who really led our retreat. Her name is Patria. We had her on the podcast the last few episodes. She made a comment to me, a kind of a question, I think, and she said, "Are you afraid to be delighted in?" And I think that happened maybe, I don't know, early on in the retreat. And then I was kind of pondering that. And then we came to this question of what would I give my little girl? And I really struggled to come up with an answer. As a matter of fact, I think I took a pass and then I answered it the following day in conjunction with the next question. But what I said was I would give my little girl Patria for her mommy.
Mhm.
And in saying the words, there was a lot of vulnerability for me in that moment in saying those words out loud. Not that I thought I would be judged or anything like that, but just a lot of vulnerability to own that. And we've talked about on the podcast, Kandace, how, I've gone through life looking at so many people, asking the question, "Are you my mother?" And I have gotten so much good care through the years, especially these last few years, really good care. And yet that came out in that moment at that retreat as I saw the goodness of Patria's good mama heart. I just felt like my little girl was saying, "I want Patria for my mommy." And I'm laughing because there's innocence and joy there. And I'm just embracing, I think, the youngness of that little girl who needed a good mommy too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I know Patria just lit up with joy at the thought of how you've allowed her to bring good mothering to your own heart. Thank you
She
for
made
sharing.
a comment as we were processing that a little bit. And she said, I think we kind of talked about how many times I've asked for the good mama. And she made the comment, "Share, there are just not enough homecomings for you." And I just had to pause and I said, "I'm not sure if I know what you mean." And she told this story about how she just offered her open arms repeatedly to one of her children when they were little. And just they would go through this little ritual. And she just said, "That's what I'm talking about. There's not enough of that for you." And it just, the picture, I'm just seeing that over and over, like that good mama with arms thrown wide open in welcome. And yeah, so sweet for my little girl.
Yeah, and not just your little girl, right? I think when she said that, we all paused if we didn't experience that, right? And there are women that didn't experience walking in the door, seeing delight on the face and arms wide open.
Yeah.
And this is what we do. We help one another experience the goodness of what we needed back then, but we can still get today. Yeah.
so that we can begin to going back to the other aspect of my struggle with delight, but so that we can experience the goodness of someone delighting in us without strings attached, like to feel the sense of not only Patria, but these women delighting in me, and not because something will be demanded of me in return.
Yeah, I just had something come up in me that I want to share. I don't know why this is coming up, but if there's at least one person who just thinks this is just all mushy gushy emotional stuff, right? What does that have to do with real life? I will tell you this. When you are delighted in and you know it, you will be delightful.
Mm, yeah.
This is why we do this,
And
right?
and when you are delightful, why is it important?
When you're delightful, you're joyful, you're happy, you're generous,
Yeah, you can
right?
love with abandon.
We can't give what we don't have. And so do we sit around eating bonbons and just mushy gushy? No, we go to some really hard shit.
Yeah, yeah,
But absolutely, like, this isn't just, I don't even know what I want to say. Like, if you're struggling in your business, you need to experience delight. If you're struggling in your marriage, you need to experience being delighted in.
you
If
struggle
you're,
as a mom.
yes, and it will cover whatever struggle. And I'm not trying to simplify it, but I'm just saying there is a difference between somebody who wakes up in the morning and knows that they are worthy of being delighted in and therefore delight in others, and someone who doesn't.
Yeah,
No shame. Like,
yeah,
it's just true. And no one's perfect at that. I can have mornings that I have to really work through some things, but for the most part, that's getting really quiet.
yeah, mm, yeah,
Yeah. I went off on a tangent there about that, but I just felt this is like, I don't want to minimize how big it is to know that you're delighted in.
yeah, yeah. It's a gift, and it's a result of a lot of hard work and being in proximity with people who have done the work and are doing the work and understand the brain and body dynamics of trauma. And if we could give a pitch to our listeners, it would be like get a coach and find a group, because these are the two dynamics that have been the most life changing for us.
I was listening to a podcast this morning. There was a neuroscientist talking, and he was going through all the brain stuff. And then he kind of went, really the bottom line is oxytocin is the bonding hormone. And the more you can experience that, right, in authentic relationships, you will heal. You will heal. And, he had spent all this time going through all of these things. And then the bottom line was love,
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah. Here we are back at
What we're
love.
talking
Yeah.
about today.
Yeah. How about for you, Kandace? Do you want to share how you answered that question for your little girl?
I had several things that was coming up in my mind, and it just, none of them kind of felt like, yeah, probably not that. But one kept coming back around, and I really had like, well, why would that be such a gift to her? I said that I would give my little girl the gift of adventures.
Mm,
The more I was being engaged about that, there was this sense. So I do have a few memories of getting to, one time we went to Colorado. So we didn't do a lot of vacations or anything, but I did get to go to Colorado one time. And I just remembered how it felt to be outside of the home, outside of my small town, being in nature, moving my body.
mm,
And like, I would have given her more of that, because home life was really hard and heavy most of the time.
yeah.
We did like a few amusement parks, and those were fun, but that's not kind of what I'm talking about. It was something about like, I want to see the world still.
Yeah. I'm curious too, Kandace. Would you say that adventure is a way that you connect with your little girl now?
Hmm. Yes, very much so.
You've done a lot of pretty amazing like kayaking trips and horseback riding and some
Mhm.
things where you've really gotten into nature. And what do you think it is about these spaces that opens up that connection between you and your little girl? Or why is it that your little girl comes alive in those spaces?
I think, wow, I just felt a surge of emotion. Like what came up in me is no conflict. It was just a place that there wasn't a conflict to solve. It was just getting to be. Mhm.
Yeah. And you were put in the position of having to take care of conflict a lot.
Mhm.
Do you think there's something about the largeness of nature that contains the largeness of your little girl or the even I'll use like the word the wildness of your little girl?
This feels like a setup because you already know this answer.
I think it's important to talk about it though. I feel like it's so there's yeah.
No, no, I think yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I shared about sitting at the ocean and seeing it and seeing how big and how wild the ocean is. And my little girl, who always felt too much, feels contained in nature, feels contained. I think that's one reason why I've been drawn to believe that there is a God who can handle me
Yeah.
because it felt like most of the adults in my life couldn't handle me.
How does your little girl feel that you have gifted her adventure? Have you noticed anything?
Oh, yeah, especially here in the last probably 3 or 4 years. It's almost like I have to put limits on that because I could do it every week or
Yeah.
whatever, every month, but I often hear, "What are we doing next?"
Yeah.
So just the anticipation. Yeah, and so that's just one example of a question that we didn't go to this as a story work retreat, but man, the stories that were shared and how much more we got to know about one another was such a gift.
Yeah.
And one that we hold very in a very sacred space.
Yeah. And I think the comment came up a few times over the weekend about mirroring, how we serve as mirrors for one another. And I think that was a really significant part of the weekend. I think for many of us that it's like we could hold up the mirror for one another and help them see themselves in a different way, in a new day, with and in a new way, with a new perspective, and just to come away from that time together feeling like, I think I'm seeing myself a little differently than when I went in.
Yeah, well, I'm smiling right now because I remember when that happened to me when I was saying something about myself, but then everybody said something different, but they were saying the same thing.
Mm.
Okay. And we did that for different ways that we were seeing ourselves in woundedness or maybe not being kind to ourselves. And so here is the power of the group. It's that consensus, it's that many witnesses that are all seeing the truth of who you are when you're struggling to do that. It's pretty overwhelming. And we do have to be careful that we don't overwhelm or flood someone, which it feels like, oh, we can all just let people know how much we delight in them and love them. But when the system has a lot of shame or confusion, it can feel like too much. And that is something I'm learning about me is to contain sometimes like I can see something clearly and I just want to, tackle it.
Yep.
And I had to learn that I can overwhelm someone.
Yeah. It's so good. And I think as we just kind of bring this episode to a close, what I would like to say to our listeners is you hear Kandace and I often encouraging people to reach out, find a coach, talk to us. And we believe in the one-to-one. I mean, clearly we talk about it a lot. It's changed our lives, but We also want to really give the nudge for a group. And there are story groups available that you, our listeners, can connect
Mhm.
with. And often they're really affordable. It's a place to get connected with other people like you, people who are doing the work, so that you feel like you're not alone and you begin to hear other stories and you begin to allow other voices to speak into your story. And there's a magic that happens in groups that just cannot happen in any other way. And so we want to encourage our listeners to reach out if you would like connections to some of the people who we know who are offering story groups. We just could not recommend this even enough.
Very true. Very
Yeah.
true. It was good to be with you today.
You too, friend. Love you so much.
Love you too, Sher.
Thank you for listening to Processing Trauma Out Loud. Make sure to check out the show notes for links to suggested resources and social media. Like, subscribe, and follow to keep up with our weekly content. And if you don't mind, take a moment to rate and review us. Your feedback is extremely valuable and contributes to the success of this podcast. One last thing, if you have found this podcast helpful in any way, or if you have questions on how to take the next steps on your healing journey, please reach out to us via email at KandaceSher@gmail.com. That's KandaceSher@gmail.com. Our sound engineer is Jeremiah Jones of Auditory LLC. We welcome you to join us for more conversations soon. Take care.